In the mid-2000s, Jamaica and the wider Caribbean were gripped by a financial fever that promised to turn ordinary citizens into wealthy elites overnight. At the center of the storm was one name that commanded both reverence and eventually utter devastation: Olint. Led by the soft-spoken but incredibly charismatic David Smith, Olint was marketed not just as a mere investment, but as an exclusive society for the financially enlightened. It wasn't just the average worker who got caught up in the hype. It was the who's who of Caribbean society. We're talking about doctors, high-ranking attorneys, senior political figures, and even religious leaders who believed that David Smith had discovered a secret algorithm for mastering the foreign currency exchange market. The returns being promised, and for a while being paid out, was staggering, often ranging from 8 to even as high as 20% per month. Now, in a world where traditional banks were offering single-digit returns for the year, Olint seemed like a miracle. But as we look back from the perspective of early 2026, the miracle has long since been revealed as one of the most sophisticated and damaging Ponzi schemes in regional history. Today on Money Talk JA, we are going beyond the headlines to investigate exactly where those hundreds of millions of US dollars went and provide a realistic guide on how you or your family members might still be able to claim a partial refund. Before we proceed, if you want more videos like this, please hit that like and subscribe to the channel right now. It will really help our community grow. Plus, you will receive notification when we release more content like this in the future. To understand where the money went, you first have to understand the scale of the lie. David Smith claimed that Olint was a massive player in the foreign exchange market, using high-frequency trading to generate immense profits. However, when the Financial Services Commission and eventually the United States FBI and Department of Justice got involved, the truth was much darker. Olint was never a trading powerhouse. In fact, investigators found that very little actual trading ever took place. The vast majority of the returns paid out to early investors were not profit at all. They were simply the principal investments of the people who joined later. It was a textbook Ponzi scheme designed to collapse the moment the influx of new cash never kept up with the demands for withdrawals. But if the money was not being traded, where did the estimated 400 million US dollar go? The trail of Olint's missing millions lead to a lifestyle that can only be described as cinematic in its excess. While thousands of Jamaicans were mortgaging their homes to join Olint, David Smith was living like a billionaire. A massive chunk of investors' funds were siphoned off to purchase high-end real estate in Florida, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and luxury properties right here in Jamaica. And the money didn't stop at houses. It bought private jets to whisk the inner circle across the globe, a fleet of the world's most expensive luxury vehicles, and millions of dollars in high-end jewelry. But perhaps most controversially, the money was used to buy influence. Significant sums were funneled into political campaigns across the Caribbean. These donations were designed to create a political shield, making it difficult for regulators to shut the scheme down while it was still growing. Millions more were hidden in a lot of offshore bank accounts and shell companies, many of which remain co-leads to this very day. The first sign of trouble came in March of 2006 when the FSC and FID officials raided their offices in New Kingston. They seized large quantities of business records, computer equipment, checkbooks, and some cash. After a lengthy legal battle, the FSC issued a formal cease and desist order against David Smith and Olint, alleging that they were conducting securities business without the required license. But instead of complying, they moved their operations to the Turks and Caicos Islands. The end came in 2008 when authorities in the Turks and Caicos raided Olint's offices. By 2010, David Smith was facing the music. He was eventually sentenced to 30 years in prison after pleading guilty to 23 counts of wire fraud and money laundering in a US federal court. However, his conviction in the United States was a double-edged sword for investors. On one hand, it meant he was finally held accountable, but on the other hand, it triggered a massive legal battle over his remaining assets. Because his crimes touched US soil and utilized the US banking system, the Department of Justice was able to seize and forfeit millions of dollars in cash and properties connected to his name. Now, this brings us to the most important questions a lot of you have been waiting for. Is there any hope for a refund? The answer is a cautious yes, but you must understand the process. There are two primary avenues that have been active over the years. First, the US Department of Justice remission process. Because the US government seized Smith's assets, they created a remission program. This allows verified victims of the Olint fraud to apply for a portion of the forfeited funds. Over the last decade, multiple rounds of payments have been distributed to thousands of victims globally. Second, official liquidators. Separate from the US government, there are court-appointed liquidators in the Turks and Caicos and Jamaica working to sell off Olint's physical assets and distribute the proceeds to creditors. If you or somebody you know were a victim of Olint, here is what you need to do right now. First, you need to ensure that you are on the official qualified victims list by checking the DOJ victim portal. If you have not received communication from the US DOJ or the liquidators by now, you need to proactively reach out to the asset forfeiture section of the Department of Justice. Next, you must gather your proof. To claim a refund, you need your original Olint certificates, bank transfer records, or deposit slips. Obviously, without a paper trail, your claim is unlikely to be approved. Finally, manage your expectations. This is the hard part. The total value of assets recovered is only a small fraction of the total money lost. Most refunds are distributed as cents on the dollar. If you lost $10,000, if you're lucky, you might get back a check for say $500 or $1,000. It's not a full recovery, but it's better than nothing. The Olint era remains a scar on the financial history of Jamaica. It serves as a permanent warning that if an investment opportunity sounds like a sure thing with impossible returns, it is almost certainly a trap. As we navigate the markets of 2026, let the lessons of David Smith remind us to always prioritize transparency, regulation, and due diligence. Thanks for watching, and click the link on screen now to watch another Jamaican financial content. Catch you in the next video.